Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. Let me ask you something. When you think about getting audited by the IRS, what comes to mind? What feelings come up? How does it make you feel? And what's kind of your visceral reaction to that? If I said, just think about this. If I said, hey, I have some news for you, I'm gonna say bad news. Maybe bad news for you, but if I have some bad news, we're gonna get audited this year. What goes through your head? And I'll tell you what goes through a lot of people's heads because they've shared it with me that their gut instinct when they found out that was going to happen or they got a letter saying they were under audit, people thought they were going to go to jail. People thought they were in trouble. People thought that this was going to cost them an arm and a leg. It's going to be a massive inconvenience. That's probably true. But a lot of very hyperbolic and very extreme reactions and assumptions about what was going to happen. And I acknowledge there's a ton of fear out there around getting audited by the IRS. I don't deny that. Personally, I'm not exactly waiting in line to volunteer for that process either. However, I don't know. Like there are so many other ways I could describe the inconvenience of the IRS and auditing, but I think people overemphasize the negativity. So there's a couple of things I want to clear up when it comes to getting audited, but also the IRS. Now, the first thing I want to identify is the experience of getting audited. And the best way I can describe it, and when I have shared this with other accountants, by the way, they're all like nodding their heads, going, yes, this is exactly what it's like. And the analogy I came up with is getting pulled over by the police when you're speeding. So think of it this way, okay? There are so many different things that you think you're going to get audited for, like these little play in the gray deductions that you're taking. So let's just say that you like, and again, like this isn't me condoning or authorizing all this stuff. I'm just, or giving you permission or tax advice, first of all. But let's just say that you missed a couple things and you snuck in some personal expenses or entertainment expenses, which by the way aren't deductible, or some things that are traditionally not deductible into your office expenses or into your P&L. And it was like, out of your 100K profit, it was $100. Okay. So it's not even like 1% of your, of your expenses or of your profit, excuse me. So let's just say you have this like tiny $100 expense that's snuck in under like $1,000 profit. A lot of you think that if caught, if you get quote unquote pulled over, that they're going to find that you might go to jail, whatever, like consequences will happen. But here's the real deal. Let's just talk about it. Let's just say you get audited, AKA pulled over. The reason why you probably got pulled over is simply think of it this way. When you got pulled over when you weren't speeding? I don't know about you, but I got pulled over when I wasn't even speeding because my tags came back with something weird or my inspection sticker was expired. There was something visually about my car that prompted the officer to pull it over, even though I was doing nothing wrong. Let me make that very clear. I was doing nothing wrong, but I got pulled over. The same thing can happen to you in an audit. You could be essentially randomly selected. So, first of all, you getting picked for audit has nothing to do with you doing anything bad. Okay. Number two is if you did get pulled over, it's usually for speeding. It's usually for speeding. And here's the thing, officers will pull you over for speeding if what? If you're speeding like well over the limit. I have very seldom seen a police officer pull over a car, use their time and resources of the city or county to pull over somebody who's 4 miles over the speed limit. Have you? Probably not. Now, somebody who's 40 miles over, damn right. But 4 or 5 miles over, I think, don't quote me on this, but my impression growing up was that if it was like under 9 miles over, they generally didn't bother, or it was kind of up to their discretion. They had some free time. But in general, they're looking for the people who are going 40 miles over, 20 miles over. And there's a reason why I say that, because think of it this way. The IRS is looking for those people. They're looking for people who are going 20 miles an hour over, 40 miles an hour over. They don't have the luxury, if you will, that police officers have to visually see that as it's happening. They only have a suspicion based on how you're presenting your tax return. So, your tax return could give the impression that you might be speeding, AKA taking more deductions in a high way above what you're entitled to, or, understating your income. Something is amiss and they wanna align it. They see a discrepancy, they see a story that doesn't make sense. And that doesn't mean you did something wrong. It just means that they see something that didn't make sense to them and they want the opportunity to ask you. So, that's what it is. You're getting pulled over. Now, once you get pulled over by the cops, what happens? They ask you for your license and registration, right? In an IRS audit, they're asking you for documentation to substantiate, like, what you were up to on your tax return. So, like, you claimed $10,000 of office expense. Like, please show me receipts for that, or show me what that was. And if you have good books, AKA that registration and your license and everything is in that glove compartment, that's your bookkeeping. Not having bookkeeping and going into an IRS audit is like speeding down the highway at 40 miles an hour over the speed limit without your license and registration in the vehicle. Because if you don't have those things, guess what? We got a level 2 problem in the interaction with the cop, right? Because that's number 1, do you have your docs? Number 2 is your demeanor and your cooperation. So if you are back talking the officer, if you are being difficult or refusing to comply, the officer reserves the right to escalate the situation in most states and most jurisdictions. And if you think about it this way, the agent will only become truly difficult with you if you're difficult with them, for the most part. Are there bad actors in all of these situations? Totally. But I'm generalizing and I'm trying to make it clear that if you can neutralize this negative feeling you have toward the IRS by understanding that you're simply getting pulled over. And we don't know why yet, so don't freak out. And then it might be nothing and you move on. It might just take some time. You might be late to wherever you were going because you had to pull over and deal with all this, right? But it might be fine. Most people I've talked to or audits I've supported come out unscathed, or come out with findings that are just completely logical. We fix something and we move on.
Hey, it's Shannon, and I wanted to remind you that the love language of podcasters is reviews. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of seconds just to leave us a review if you're enjoying this show, we would really, really appreciate it. Okay, back to the show.
But let's talk about the findings they can have. So, and I'm gonna use some kind of like facetious examples, like very extreme, kind of funny examples. Like, please don't get offended or anything over this, but like I always say that getting audited by the IRS is like getting pulled over. And as long as you don't have a dead hooker in the trunk, you're fine, right? You should only be freaking out to the level that you are if you have done something legitimately wrong or criminal. Like if you have a dead hooker below and a couple of guns in the back, then yeah, you have the right to sweat when you get pulled over. Other than that, if, like, they're pulling you over because your seatbelt was unclicked, boo frickin' who, pay the $75 fine and move on with your life. And I'm telling you that 99% of the audits are a seatbelt click, and they're not something major, but we are associating the outcome of the extreme criminal situation with every single audit that happens. And that's not reality. That's just not. It's like saying that every time a cop's gonna pull me over, I'm going to end up in jail. Like, jail isn't even on the table for a speeding ticket until you have escalated it to a certain point. And the same goes for the IRS. So, just really, these 2 things align so freaking well in terms of how we approach them. So, understand that the IRS is tasked to enforce the tax law, just like the police officers are enforcing, let's say, traffic law. And they are just the vehicle, the mechanism that's talking to you to enforce that. The IRS themselves, the actual agents, which by the way, let's go into the truth around these agents. Now, You may feel one way or another about cops. I get it. But stay with me here. That overall, police officers, IRS agents, like, you may have a negative impression of them because of how they're associated or because you've heard about something happening in the past with one of these types of officials. Now, that's generalizing, but I would say from my experience with IRS, which is my expertise, I haven't had a ton of interactions with cops, luckily, but my experience with IRS agents is that of, you know, these are great people who are here to serve. They have a job to do. They have a duty, a job description, and they are just here to execute that. And they have a checklist or a script they follow, and that's simply it. They are not out to damage you, harm you, make you feel bad, take your money, all these things. Like they are just there to make sure that nobody is acting criminally and they wanna work with you as much as they can. They're actually really sweet people. Everyone I've talked to has been super nice. And let me layer this on. Any politician, especially right now, any politician, anyone who you hear talk about all those 80,000 IRS agents that are gonna hunt you down, please throw that rhetoric out the freaking window. I'm done hearing about it. Because let me tell you something. They're talking about the 80,000 IRS agents they hired. Number 1, they didn't hire 80,000 IRS agents. They got a budget that if was only used to hire, could have hired that many people. They are also using it for technology upgrades. Thank freaking God, because they're still on fax machines. But also they use that to hire a lot of agents. You know why? Because during COVID, we couldn't get through the telephone system because there weren't enough people picking up the phone. And by the way, agent also includes the people picking up the phone, sitting in their houses, just acting as phone operators answering questions. So, an agent doesn't mean FBI field agent from, like, one of those c cop TV shows. An IRS agent is simply an employee who's there to help facilitate the process of getting forms filed. So, you can't rightfully, in my opinion, complain that you can't get through the IRS, you haven't gotten your ERC stuff back, you can't get your S corp approved, your tax refund isn't sent yet, your tax return isn't processed yet. If you're complaining about any of that, you shouldn't also complain that the IRS has too many employees because the reason why all that stuff isn't done is they're understaffed. And so they did actually bump up the staff with that budget, which was great. And that actually increased the level of service. You guys may not know that, but because of the level of interaction I have with the agents on a, weekly, monthly basis, I noticed that. So kudos that they've supported that. So basically it's like adding more cops on the street, which and here's my analogy. They added more cops in the office. So there aren't more people pulling you over, okay? But they added more cops to pick up the phone for 911 calls. See? Wouldn't you want that? I'm like, we added more 911 dispatchers. We did not deploy more state troopers on the highway, okay? So there could have been more, but not 80,000. Okay, so let's be clear. If you hear that rhetoric, please dismiss it and please let people know that's not a thing. That's just used as a combative number to make a point. And that always drives me nuts. So thanks for letting me sit in my soapbox for a second on that one. But yeah, the key here is that when you get audited, when and if you get audited, you may have done nothing wrong, but if you did anything, it could have been that the cop just happened to see you without your seatbelt on, and they're gonna pull you over, ask you some questions, you can move on with your life. It doesn't mean they have a suspicion you have the dead hooker in the trunk, okay? It doesn't mean you're in big trouble. Just you have to understand that in this process, there's a whole spectrum of things that can happen, and likely you have nothing to worry about. You know, I got these texts when I used to text with my community, these questions would come up like, "Hey, am I gonna go to jail?" Or, "Hey, I think I forgot to include a 1099 on my tax return. Am I gonna go to jail?" I'm like, "No, you're not gonna go to jail." And I would also say, like, "Why would you go to jail?" "I don't know." And it's so crazy that they have this kind of chokehold on your brain thinking like, "I'm gonna go to jail." And I say, "Why are you going to jail?" And they say, "I don't know." If you don't know, then why do you assume that's the outcome? If you don't even know what you did wrong? Like, why are you already kind of sentencing yourself to jail time without even knowing what crime you committed? Isn't that crazy? You committed no crime. There will be no jail time. It's okay. 90% of the time, 99% of the time of people listening to the show. One of y'all might be doing something fishy, but who knows? If you are intentionally evading taxes to the tune of like multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, like I hope you're not listening to the show. You know yourself. You know what you're doing. You know if you're speeding. You know what risks you're taking. Just trust your gut on that. And know that it doesn't really, it's not as bad as you think. It's not as bad as you think. IRS agents are not as bad as you think. Please get this image out of your head that they are some type of evil entity. They're not. Like I said, my job is to make sure that you're not paying any more than you should be. But I'm also not trying to, you know, mess with the cops or allow you to commit a crime and try to get you to steer around the cops or anything like that. I want to just make sure that we're all operating in harmony and everyone can accomplish their goals without harming the other. Cool? All right. I knew that would make sense. So, yeah, just take this with you and understand that there's really no reason to be afraid. I promise.
One of the things that holds people back from starting their business and going all in on it to grow it is this hesitation around setting it up properly or cleaning things up to make sure everything is legally and compliantly sound. Between setting up the actual business legally and knowing how to manage the money, there's a lot that can intimidate somebody and scare them into not starting. And that's why I bundled up my 5 best resources all together for brand new business owners or for anyone who's looking to clean things up. This is my 5-day mindset refresh because it always starts with mindset, and my business financial quick starter, which is my starter course for anyone looking to start a business with all the key elements you need to do in order. My tax deduction guide with hundreds of deductions you can take for your business today. My Money Pro matchmaker on how to find the right professional for you, and my cash flow forecasting mini course. This is the ultimate Swiss Army knife. It includes tools and templates, everything you need to get started on your business successfully or clean things up if you feel like you've fallen behind. Grab your copy right now. The Small Business Starter Kit is yours for free using the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.